Right, we are going to build a remote trigger, a remote event, so that the client can communicate to the server. And it's important to understand that it's one-way communication from the client to the server. The server is not sending anything back. So let's go and we add a part. So I'm just going to add a block in here. Let's move it closer. I'm going to move it up in the air slightly so I can just walk into it. I'm going to rename that to trigger block, right? And what this process consists of a couple of elements. So we've got something that's going to trigger it. In this case, when my player touches this block. So I'll need to add a local script to this. So I'm going to add a script, and I'm going to make it a client-side script, and let's call this client script. So we've got a trigger, we've got a client script. Now, on replicated storage, we need to add a remote event. It doesn't have any settings that we need to change apart from the name. So I'm going to call it remote little dog. I like doing that just so that you can see we've renamed it. So now we have a trigger, we have a client script, we have a remote event in replicated storage. Last thing we need is a server script. So I'm going to add a script here. And this is just because it's in server script, it's a server script. So I'm going to call this server script remote, right? So let's make this trigger block touchable. So I've got client script up here, and we can put in there just so that we can see that it fires client script, right? Because it's parented to trigger block, I can get a handle on trigger block by saying local, let's call it trigger, equals script dot parent. So that gives me a handle to the block. Now I need to get a handle to the remote event in replicated storage. So I need to be able to reference that thing. So I'm going to say remote event equals game dot replicated storage dot remote little dog. There we go. So now I've got a handle to that remote event functionality. Then I'm going to say, all right, so when I'm on my trigger dot touched, right, I'm going to connect it to an anonymous function. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do remote event, and then we can fire server, right? Then I can send variables. So let's just say this was, and then a second variable, my little dog. Right, so those are the two variables, two string variables we're going to pass on. Then on the server script, let's say that we print out server script running. Okay, what we want to do here is, again, we want to get a handle to that remote object. So I'm going to say local remote event equals game dot replicated storage dot remote little dog. Right, now I've got a handle on that. Then I'm going to say remote event dot on server event. I'm going to connect that to an anonymous function again, but in this case I'm actually going to get the player that is currently in the game, and I'm going to receive my variables. Now I know that I sent two variables, so I can receive them. Then I can say print, I'll say server, and let's connect variable 1 and variable 2. Okay, so let's have a look at what happens. We've got a trigger, it's a client script. This identifies the block. It fetches a handle to the remote event. Then it uses the block and it says when it's touched, connect an anonymous function. We use that handle to the remote event and we use the fire server method on that. And we pass 2 variables. We don't do anything to the remote event. That's a trigger that's being facilitated by the framework. Then the remote script, we say, let's get a handle to that remote event again, that thing that's facilitating the communication. And we say that when that runs, when that on-server event fires, connected to an anonymous function, we'll receive 3 variables. First one is the player that is connected to this action, and then our 2 variables. So let's have a look. When we play this, when I walk into my block, I should see output at the bottom here. There we go. This was my little dog, and that is coming from the server. So that's the 2 variables put together in the remote event.